You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1.
Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast, a mid-season break news show. How about this? 2 weeks from the Dutch Grand Prix, Jonathan Simon hosting here in place of Spanners. Yes, you're hearing an Aussie. And yes, there's an Aussie in front in the F1 title race. We'll talk about that in a little bit in a moment's time. I've got to say just quickly before I get into the news, I was on holiday this week, my first ever put your feet up holiday in my life, and I almost bumped into a man named Daniel Ricciardo. You would have heard his name in the news in the last week, and it wasn't for racing or anything like that. I was there enjoying the sun, tanning, getting some skin color to myself because I'm very white during the winter, and here in the southern hemisphere, somehow we can head to the tropical North Queensland is what they call it, the kind of Florida of Australia, soak in the sun in winter in August. And my girlfriend and I decided, well, let's not visit this cafe at 11 a.m. because let's enjoy the sun, because it's the only day of our little 4-day holiday that which we might get the sun. And then on our flight home 5 hours later, we go to the Instagram of the cafe, open up the story, and Daniel Ricciardo was there pretty much around the time that we were going to go. So first off, I've been salty about that for about 3 days because I would have asked him to jump on Missed Apex. And how that would have saved Daniel Ricciardo is because, unfortunately for him, the news has come out that he broke his collarbone later that day doing a little bit of dirt bike riding. So from Missed Apex to Danny Rick, we wish him all the best. And I would have told him to jump on the podcast, as I said, but unfortunately, he's not here today. And now you're stuck with myself and Matt Trumpets. Matt Trumpets, welcome.
Yeah, no British bias here, my friends. We got an Aussie and an American, and we're going to lay down the law.
It's a shame, really. I mean, Danny Rick would have been a great get, I think, mid-season. That's something we need to work on. Let's work on that. Daniel Ricciardo on the Missed Apex podcast sometime. That's a pact. Sometime in the next 4 months before the calendar year ends.
I can't believe personally that you are now entirely responsible for him having a broken collarbone. Frankly, that might have ruined our only chance. He's going to listen to this and he's going to be like, oh, it's that Jono guy's fault that I broke my collarbone. So no way I'm going to be on the show now.
No, I'm very sorry, Daniel. I'm very, very sorry. I could have then been his guardian angel. I could have been the right-hand man. It could have been that, the little voice in those cartoons you watch where it's a little stick figure on the right shoulder. Unfortunately, no, I wasn't there to help Daniel Ricciardo, who's on a bit of a, I don't know what I've been reading lately. He's on a bit of a soul search, really, post F1. He doesn't really know what to do with his life lately. So good luck to Danny Rick. I don't think we'll see him in Formula One anytime soon. But what we will talk about is the upcoming news in the mid-season break. So first off, there was, if anybody saw, Stefano Domenicali did an interview during the week and teased some changes to the sport, including reverse grid sprint races. So that's something we want to bring up again. That's been brought up for a few years, but again, that's been floated once more. We'll touch on the outrage of McLaren's strategy calls. Of course, as you know, the Aussies think the Brits are wrong. The Brits think the Aussies are wrong. The Brits want Lando to win. The Aussies think that McLaren are helping him win and they don't want Oscar Piastri to win. Anyway, it's a bit of a dilemma. We'll touch on that. We'll touch on how the strategy over at McLaren is going to shape the rest of this championship season, starting with Zandvoort in a couple of weeks' time. And finally, Christian Horner. What is actually happening with Christian Horner? We'll try and actually figure all that out over the next hour. But first, got to remind you, we're an independent podcast produced today by Uncle Steve in the background, another Aussie. With the kind support of our patrons and partners. We might be wrong, but we're first. And we're recording live, of course, so we have our patrons and partners in the live chat. Hello, everybody. I already see Stuart having a dig at Aussie, saying, of course, an Australian's going to talk about upside-down reverse grids. And so we had this sent in from a listener, Matt. This is from Ahmed Sharky, as he's known to the Missed Apex community. He says, Stefano Domenicali on a, I'm going to blank it out, a rival podcast. Everything's a rival these days to Missed Apex, I would say. He seemed to signal an increase in sprint races. And Sharky wants to know what format would be best, perhaps reverse grids. Now, that's interesting, Matt, because Stefano Domenicali has said it seems to be a more serious idea these days with teams to go with reverse grid sprint races.
Yeah, I don't personally see that happening, especially if your sprint races are going to count in the constructors and the drivers championship. If it was an entirely separate thing, maybe they would do that, but that's a Formula 2 thing, and I think where we are with the sprints is honestly, they're very popular with the promoters. The promoters really like having the Saturday race and the Sunday race, and you can understand why. That makes them more money. It gets more people in the gates. And frankly, now that Liberty's acquired MotoGP has a sprint race every single weekend. So, as with everything else, I think they're going to be looking for that balance point between the maximum amount of money they can extract versus any potential loss of entertainment value over the weekend if you have too many of them. And it is a delicate balance. And well, if we're lucky, because maybe you talk about it later, if we're lucky, the regulations next year will be a little more amenable to passing and racing, which could make the sprint races more fun to watch.
I've already heard Alex Van Gien sigh from about 5 countries away because more sprint races, and I'm with Van Gien on this. It means less time for us in life to run errands. And the older I get, and this is a sad part about life, the older I get, the less time I have to watch or consume sports and content. So Formula One's really up there, is number one at the moment. Now, you mentioned about MotoGP doing it every race, which is interesting because Dominicali also teased that he doesn't think that's going to get to a point next year, but he says that could evolve over time. So currently we have 6 this year. Now, it doesn't mean we could, maybe next year they reveal there could be 8s, they could adjust things and go to 10. Like, who knows what the number will eventually be by the end of next year and what we actually see. But potentially 5 years down the track, we could see what MotoGP do. I get it. There's a whole bunch of logistical issues as well and a whole bunch of other problems they got to deal with too. But then you also mentioned about having a separate sprint championship. And that's something that Stefano, and I listened to this podcast that he mentioned. But the reason I'm turned off by it, Matt, is because you already have a struggle having people or getting people interested in the constructors title. And that's been around for, what's it been now? 75, 85 years in Formula One. No, 75 years, excuse me, since 1950. I can't do math. I think we've all just figured that out. But how would you get people to gain traction or support for a championship that will exist for 5 years, let alone one we already don't care about that's been around for literally almost a century?
I mean, that's why people have marketing jobs, right? Presumably, they will make a big deal about it. It will be a separate prize, some sort of fun thing. But yeah, I don't know. In MotoGP, the points count, and it actually becomes strategic. And 2 years ago, we actually saw Jorge Martin win the championship based on the strength of his sprint performances rather than his performance in the Grand Prix. But the other thing about MotoGP to understand is the races aren't as long. So their sprint race is sub half hour, and their longest race is maybe half of a Formula One race. So content wise, it makes sense for them because they're putting out. If you just watch the sprint race and the Grand Prix, you're still not quite at, or you're barely at a single Grand Prix for Formula One. That's going to be, as you rightly point out, it's going to be a bigger issue for people committing more time. And the thing with the sprint race is it's a treat for people who go to the track, especially. Although, yeah. And even there, like you think, oh, great. Well, there's only one practice. So it's more likely the big teams might get something wrong and be stuck at the back and have to work their way forward. We've seen that happen. But over the long run, the big teams are the big teams because they have the most resources. Over the long run, that's just going to advantage the biggest, most well-financed teams that have the best cutting edge tools. So over the long run, it's actually going to be bad to have too many of them because it'll allow the big teams to sort of exploit their information advantage, if you will.
Yeah. But then reverse grid sprint races, which is the original topic, Matt. Why
Sorry,
not?
what are
Why
we
not just
talking
do
about?
that? Well, why don't we just go? Instead of caring about all the logistics, like we mentioned, and caring about all the will this work and we'll budget. Let's just chuck them. Why don't we want to see Max Verstappen at the back of the grid passing 16 cars? Who cares about the budget? Let's watch
Uh,
that.
it's nothing to do with budget. Max is going to care if he can't score the maximum amount of points his car will let him, because he had to start at the back and loses the drivers' championship as a result of it. You're never going to get that past the drivers or the teams if it has any effect at all on the proper drivers' championship and the constructors, which is, let's remind you, where all the money is. Now, my personal thing is I think they should pay Pirelli a large sum of money to come
Oh,
up with
please.
tires that may or may not go the full sprint distance. And the teams don't get to run on them at all until they start the race. I think that could be a lot more fun. But, I'm sure people will complain about that idea too, because let's face it, the best thing about the summer break is we have all these ideas and no actual news, and we can just sit around and complain about everything like a good New Yorker.
It has been a dull mid-season break, more than we had. I mean, we were spoiled with the mini one we had after, what was it, after Silverstone, or whenever Christian Horner was sacked. We had a whole bunch of other stories. Max
Right.
Verstappen on a fake yacht or real yacht in Sardinia with Toto Wolff. Anyway, AI, whatever you want to believe from that story, we'll let you ponder and come up with your own theories on that. Now, on this, I saw a suggestion from someone of having a young drivers sprint race. Can I just say that that's called Formula 2? That's called Formula 3. I don't want to watch Formula 1 and see young drivers. I'm going to flick on Formula 2 if I want to see the young drivers in cars competing wheel to wheel. And it's a pretty good product to watch, is Formula 2 and Formula 3 usually. It's a very good product. So I don't think that's a good long-term solution. But what I do think we should do, Matt, is why not give it a shot? Because I think the yardstick here is we've got ideas that work really well, such as I thought it'd be a bad idea to do standing starts after red flags. Can I actually say that I'm very wrong? And that's one of the best ideas we've ever introduced into the sport. On the bottom end of the scale down here is knockout qualifying, which we had in 2016, which you will admit, maybe I'm throwing words in your mouth, is one of the worst ideas we've ever introduced into the sport. Now, it can't be as bad as that, right? To have
Uh,
knockout qualifying. Like reverse grid sprint races should be, if it goes badly, it can't be as worse as knockout qualifying.
that went wrong because the teams didn't understand it. And yeah, I agree. It was incredibly embarrassing that the teams simply didn't understand it and figure out how it worked. And so as a result, it did look horrible. The fundamental idea wasn't the worst, wasn't the worst, and it was an attempt. But what I like about Liberty and Formula One management is they are willing to try things. And if they don't work, they're willing to say, okay, that didn't work. We're going to stop doing it. So I think that's a positive sign for the sport to be open to change and to be willing to try new things. But it has to come with the, but we're only so committed to it, and that's going to be the key here, whatever they try. And personally, like, it could be kind of interesting. Essentially, you're going to have a third driver involved in a race. Like for me, I would be like, oh yeah, let's make that part of the championship.
Mm.
Not a lot of points, but let's have your third driver have to do some races, like your test
Ooh.
reserve driver who has to be graduated from Formula 2, but not have more than, seasons worth of Formula 1 races. Let's have that person actually have to show up and do some business on track. Then the teams will be more invested in training them. They'll be more prepared if they get an actual race seat, and it will certainly mix things up a little bit if they did that a couple of times a year.
What I really like that you mentioned, going
Yeah.
back to it, is the Liberty Media purchase of of MotoGP recently, which, if anybody doesn't know, Liberty Media, who also purchased Formula One, it's almost been a decade. Can you believe it's been that long? We're approaching 10 years of Liberty Media ownership. Now, Domenicali spoke about this, whether or not he would integrate, or Liberty Media would look to integrate, sort of, or collaborate, I think is the better word, with the sport of MotoGP, which is the Formula One on two wheels. What would you like to see, Matt? from an integration with MotoGP?
Well, first of all, any MotoGP listener will be raging right now that you called it Formula One on two wheels. This is
Sorry,
already you've
two-wheel fans.
already lost the entire MotoGP audience.
What is
So,
that offensive to say that? Can I defend
oh
myself there?
yeah, absolutely. That's like
So what
that
is
is
it? The
like the
Formula
biggest.
Two on two wheels?
No. MotoGP is simply the pinnacle of two-wheeled motorsports.
Right.
End of like we get so much grief anytime even if it's an appropriate comparison, like we're talking about tires or physics or whatever, any Formula One comparison just sets GP people right off. So off the bat, MotoGP is its own thing. In terms of integration, like, well, yeah, they race at some of the same tracks.
Hmm.
It would be very exciting to have a MotoGP weekend at the same track as your Formula One
Oh,
weekend. I would love to see that, because then I would just have an excuse to lounge around the TV all day long and pretend that I was working. Um, and I think there are some things that MotoGP does as a sport. Now, this would be FIM, which is their equivalent of the FIA. The rules and the way that teams work with each other. Honestly, I think Formula One could take a beat or two from, in terms of allowing teams to catch up, in terms of allowing them more room to test and keeping the sport close. But fundamentally, the biggest single difference, aside from the number of wheels on your vehicle, is that your riders in MotoGP actually have a lot more influence on the outcome of the race than they do in Formula One, if that makes any sense. Like in Formula One, your car is so much
yeah.
of it. It's an upper bound that's very difficult. I mean, you need like a Grosjean taking everyone out at Spa, or you need like a Bottas taking everyone out at Hungary, kind of an event, if you're a midfielder, to have a chance to win. Whereas in MotoGP, in the right conditions, if the bikes are close enough, there's you as a rider can make a real difference. And so I think that's one of the things, if people start to get into it. And we'll put a
Yep.
link in the show notes to our MotoGP pod, because we have a
Yes,
little
of
tiny
course.
one.
Yes.
If people start to get into the sport, that's one of the premier differences. That, and you can just see the work the rider does so much more easily, because they're not fully in that cockpit in the way that they are in Formula One.
Yeah, the Missed Apex MotoGP pod, which is growing very fast at a rapid rate, and definitely subscribe to that one. Well, subscribe to all our Missed Apex contributions. We have a lot going on as well. Formula E, you name it. Now, I just want to go back just a step here, Matt, to putting MotoGP as a support race. Now, Domenicali did not. Well, first off, I've just insulted MotoGP fan again,
Yeah,
because I
not a
would say
support
it's not a
race.
support race; it's an equal main event. I'm very sorry to everybody
Yeah.
on who loves two wheels, but that would be interesting. Now, it wouldn't work at a track like Monaco, because that would actually borderline be a bit hilarious, or maybe not hilarious. It would also be extremely dangerous
Yeah,
to the
no,
riders who,
MotoGP would
yeah,
never race at Monaco,
definitely
ever.
not at any street circuit. So I think you'd probably say no to that. But I would actually like to see that idea. You got the pinnacle of each four wheels and two wheel motorsport, is what most people consider the pinnacle, and you would put them together on the same weekend. I think that's a very good idea. And I do think S. Domenicali at f1.com is probably his email, I'm going to guess. And if I send that email right now, it'll probably be bounced back. But we will suggest that over to Formula One management. Now, I've got to admit, um, well, not admit, but I'll say
Yeah.
in the podcast, I swear I heard him talking about the calendar as well and any adjustments. And it seems like fans, the consensus is, they want those 20 races a year, which I think is pretty ideal. I think most fans would agree with that. Obviously, there's going to be a minority who want more or less. But the street circuit part is what I was trying to segue to. Is that the way of the future? Because Stefano Domenicali says he's not too concerned. They'll try and always look to have a balance with traditional race circuits and obviously the street circuits itself. But street circuits, I don't mind them, and kind of relates to everyday people too, Matt. Because if you think about it, how many people spend time on roads compared to racetracks?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what Formula One loves about the street circuits. And really, the model here is going to be something like Las Vegas. And so that's why they're talking about this Madrid race so much. It's sort of this hybrid of partial permanent and partial temporary track. And what they love about it is that it makes the race much more easily accessible. I don't know if you've never been to a racetrack before. They usually put them in kind of out of the way places. Now, if you're going to Zandvoort, you're in luck. You just hop on the train and you're there. But anyone who's ever been to Silverstone or Circuit of the Americas will tell you that it can be an odyssey getting to the track. But when you have them like in Singapore, and when you have them in Vegas, people can literally just stay there and wander down to the track and wander back,
Mm,
and it's much better for the fans. It's honestly, from an environmental point of view, you're also doing a lot better because people are just parked there. They're not taking vehicles back and forth. There's not a lot of transport involved. So they love it, and then that allows them to go more places more easily because the fixed cost of building a circuit is kind of huge. And once you've built it, you have to bring enough other things in that pay your actual bills because pretty much Formula One and probably MotoGP, I would, you're lucky if you get close to breaking even for the amount of money you have to pay for it to come
yeah.
be at your track. Then you have to work your rear end off the rest of the year to just try and make money. And once you don't make money, then you can't keep the track up. And then the drivers complain about it. And then you have to find more investors. So it's less money, it's easier, and it's better for the fans is the reason they like this hybrid model so much. The problem is you don't always get good racing because just
No.
because you can lay out a circuit doesn't mean that the cars will be able to compete with each other effectively. And that's where you have to be careful because I'm sure you remember watching races in Valencia, for example.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, yeah, just you might as well just
Well,
drive around in the order you reach turn one in, unless someone's car stops working.
I have to quickly to interject.
Yeah.
Valencia, as much of a boring race that usually was, ironically, 2012 Valencia, the last race we ever had there, was one of the best races I've ever seen. So I think there was an element to, we didn't really, I mean, we did get 2 years of Pirelli. You know what? I'm getting out of this hole. I'm not going to dig the hole further. I think the racetrack was bad. Now, can I summarize everything you've said over the last 2 minutes, Matt? You've basically taught me it seems like what race circuits are a terrible investment. Is that what you're saying? It's like
Yeah.
buying a car.
Horrible.
They're
Yes.
they're bad investments. Yes, like I just bought a new car recently, and I've gone, wow, this is a lot of money I need to spend on this. So I've started to service my car myself. I bought jacks, I bought stands, I bought new oil. Comment below if you do the same thing. If you service your car, I'm sure there's other people out there. It's not as uncommon as I probably think, but it's kind of fun servicing your car as well, Matt. I might actually apply for some of those 40 Red Bull jobs that they've been advertising on LinkedIn for Red Bull Racing
Might
after they
as
cleaned
well.
house.
I replaced my own battery. I'm sure we'll be fine on your CV when they're looking for a right front corner mechanic.
Yeah,
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah,
yeah,
no, they're generally terrible investments. The ones we have survived because they were built in a time when it was much less expensive to acquire the land and build the facilities, and now they're famous, so they can continue to make money, enough money year round. And also, frankly, Formula One, especially your top ends in general, get a lot of support from the government because it brings so many people into the area. They spend money on businesses. So there's always that argument.
yeah.
But if you're starting out from scratch and you're trying to capture a Formula One circuit, you're going to have to just spend so much money. And I don't, I think it would be very difficult at best to realize a profit. And if you do, you're sitting down with your investors and saying, like, we're looking 20, 30 years down the line to just maybe even recoup our initial investment, much less have a steady stream of revenue.
Well, just to wrap up on this, Domenicali also compared Formula One to like other sports when it comes to, let's say, the
Yeah.
calendar length. So he goes, oh, 20 races. Well, baseball has 160 plus games over in the US. And I thought, have you seen how many baseball games are empty? How many times I flick on a baseball game and there's a crowd of 12 out there? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not
Well,
Domenicali's best take. But go ahead.
it's American cricket. You know, you can put it on and you can absolutely watch every play, or you can just put it on and do 92 other things. And so, yeah, as a sport overall, there's loads of games, but the nature of the game lends itself to that. Formula One is a spectacle. It's an utter sheer spectacle, and you run the risk of losing that special nature of the sport if you put too much of it out there. And people would
Yeah.
probably already argue. I mean, like, I already see people sometimes saying, oh yeah, I kind of skipped this weekend because I was busy and blah blah blah. When there was 18
Well,
races, 16 races, you did not skip races, and you got up early and you watched them. So, you know, it's a very fine line.
that's exactly it. And Formula One would never be bigger than 52 races a year simply because there's 52 weekends and the amount of travel across the world. So I think we can kind of cap it at 52. That sounds ridiculous, by the way, because I know that would never happen. I don't even think we'd get close to 30. But I'm just saying, if people were robots, you could technically do 52 weeks a year. So I I kind of think about it and I go, well, Formula One's a different beast. If you ran it, Matt, like a pay-per-view boxing event, what if you had 2 races per year, Matt, and that decided your world championship? Would you be into that, Matt? 2 races per year? Just a little Floyd Mayweather fight that 200 million people tune into, and it's, oh my god, this one race is going to decide who's the champion. I don't know. That's a terrible idea, but I thought, why not throw it out there?
Well, you know, count on the Australians to have terrible ideas. Yeah, no, no, two is
Let's skip that.
clearly not enough because yeah, because you have other big name fights. You've got your fighter who's the champion, and you've got 3 or 4 people around them vying to be the person that gets to fight him, and all of those fights count. So
Mm,
if I'm a boxing fan, I don't just watch I don't watch for me, it was always Muhammad Ali. Always watched his fights until they went to pay-per-view or whatever. But yeah, no, you always watched, but then you would also watch the people fighting on the way up as well. And that's a big part of the fun. Formula One, 15, 16 is a minimum. I really feel like at 24, especially with sprint races, we're very close to capped out. If you go much
yeah,
further than that, I think the advantage, and I think what they probably really want to do is they want to think about their logistics in terms of how long are we in particular regions, and when are we going to have the weather that's most conducive to good racing, which isn't always
exactly.
dry, but is
Yeah.
also not monsoon. You know, so I think
And
it's a balance of those two factors.
And you can't race in winter either. I mean, you can do winter testing, but if it's 1 degree track temp, I don't
Yeah.
think that would fare well. But also, and a very good point, I'll leave this topic at that, is if you have more races, more fans can attend events. It's already becoming hard. Like the Australian Grand Prix is getting sold out very quickly. It's becoming very hard to get a ticket. I've gone every year, well, not every year in my lifetime, but as many years as possible. And I'm afraid that if I miss out this year, I won't get any, special tickets. I've tried that and I've tried pulling strings and people I know, and it's just very, very difficult to get tickets. So I spare a thought for the fans who do miss out, and the more races will help that because people can at least travel to a different country and maybe attend a race. Anyway, that's something to think about. Now, the regulations next year, Matt, is something else Domenicali spoke about because the driver feedback, and we know this already. I think this was mentioned a month or two ago that next year's cars are slower and harder to drive. That's not a concern, is it? That's a good thing. That's what we want to see, right? We want to see drivers struggling and finding, we want to see a challenge out there for the world's best drivers.
Yeah. So we can talk about these regulations, but fundamentally, you are correct. And in this case, the cars are considered harder to drive because they will have less grip, significantly less grip than this current generation of car has. But on the bright side, they'll drive more like a car actually should drive. You're not going to get this nailed on understeer from the Venturi tunnels from making so much of your downforce out the back of the car in the diffuser. So they'll be much better balanced, and they'll probably be easier for the engineers to get into a window where the drivers really are happy with the handling. no one on watching on TV will see the difference in lap time. It's not going to be 30 seconds difference in lap time. There are some issues. I think there will be some issues with the hybrid nature and with the amount of regeneration
Mm.
and managing the battery. I was fortunate enough to speak to someone from Honda a while back, and I asked him. This is a MotoGP person, but I asked about the Formula One
Oh,
regulations, anyways, back in March, and they were like, "We're not worried about it. It'll be fine." He says the worst thing that'll happen is on some of really long straights at certain tracks, you're going to wind up using some portion of your internal combustion engine to recharge your battery because there
that's
aren't
not too
enough
bad.
braking spots to and frankly they kind of do that already. They have all these different modes they go
Yeah.
into. You've got lift and coast, so there's always management like that. And he, at least the guy from Honda, was convinced from what he knew that it was not going to be an issue for Honda engines, which is good news for Aston, I suppose. There may be other people who do have problems with it because they've gotten some fundamental thing wrong, but that's also kind of what you get when you change regulations. And I will just say, changing
Yeah.
the aero regulations and the power unit regulations at the same time is a bit silly to me. I think you should alternate them like
It,
halfway through a regulation set, saves everybody money, and it resorts the order.
it is a recipe for disaster, but I do think by the end of the season we'll see what 3-4 seconds made up compared to the lap times in Australia. Like we don't usually see this, and this is something that us fans we don't often notice. But if we took the car from Abu Dhabi and took it back to Australia and simulated the exact same conditions, it's likely going to be maybe 2 seconds quicker. I don't know. I'm just making up a number there, but it's definitely over the course of the season and the upgrades they bring to the car. We don't see that till the next year. So then we consider, oh, look at Australia next year compared to the year before. But I think unreliability and what you mentioned as well is because we're changing the regulations so drastically. I think we're going to see a lot of unreliability next year, and I think that's cool. I think that's a missing art of motorsport is watching it in the early 2000s or mid 2000s when I was growing up, and you're like, oh, look at this driver, Juan Pablo Montoya's fourth. Oh, this is great. Oh, what? He's out of the race because he's got a hydraulics issue. What just happened? It used to happen so often, and so I don't know what you do this season as well. Like, can we do a mid-season rule change? Give every team one can of WD-40 and just hope it lasts until the end of the season, and then that's it. If it doesn't work, they just have to suffer. If you use too much of the can, is there a way we can improve unreliability, Matt? And I think next year we're kind of going to see that as these teams adapt to the new regs.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be wrong. I don't think we're gonna sadly have as much fun as we did in 2014 when Renault turned up with an engine that would only go 3 laps before it burst into flames.
Mm.
But you'll be getting a lot more of that as the teams learn how to correctly balance the need for regeneration with the need to produce power from a less powerful internal combustion engine. And what else am I'm trying to remember now what else they're doing. Oh, and you will also have the extreme fun of your electrical energy won't be next year's DRS. It won't be the wings opening. It's actually you're going to have an additional amount of power above 290 kilometers an hour if you're the trailing car you can use to try and catch the car in front of you. So that whole thing is going to change as well. And properly deploying that, I'm sure improperly deploying that will happen more than once and result in some unusual and possibly hilarious things.
Now, I'm going to move on to the final part that Stefano Domenicali sort of spoke about. And I mean, this counts as the future of the sport. I guess it's not necessarily an on track thing, but the broadcasting access. And I raise the question, should F1 TV be more accessible? Because, Matt, you're a fan of F1 TV,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think I'm sure Stefano Domenicali wants to promote their own product. It's a little bit difficult because they have free to air providers and pay TV providers in different countries and all that. But should it just be accessible to the world? Or is that going to just cause too much issue with TV broadcasters?
It should be accessible to the world. The big challenge is, and as you know, we've already talked about boxing a little bit, but one of your bigger challenges ultimately is to balance the fact that if I'm doing pay-per-view and like I pay for my Formula One TV, you make lots of money, but it's impossible to make as much money if you just put it on regular over-the-air TV with commercials. But if you don't put it on over the air TV with commercials at all, eventually your sport will dwindle. Now, maybe
Yeah.
social media channels are making up for some differential there. But yeah, fundamentally, I think if F1 had its way, it would offer itself in all the countries where you can already see, like if I buy my basic cable package, I can watch Formula One on Sky Italia or whatever it's on. Okay, great. So I can watch it. But then if I'm really into it, then I have the option to get Formula One TV, and then I can get the Sky Italia broadcast or the Formula One TV broadcast, and I can get the extra data screens and all the other extra little programs that they make, a lot of which they'll put up on YouTube anyway. But I think they're hemmed in by the TV contracts they inherited from Bernie, and then by the fact that if you already had that exclusive deal, obviously UK is a great example here, not British bias, but um, they already had an exclusive deal. They worked out with Bernie, and you can get F1 TV for the data and stuff, but you can't get the actual broadcast or shows if you want it. And I think as they go to new markets and negotiate with new broadcasters, that's always going to be in the back of their mind, because that's what we're hearing now about the US, which is going to have a new broadcaster after ESPN, and we're hearing that F1
Hmm.
TV is going to persist. And that's because I think they've already got themselves a big enough hold here that that's just something that they have to
Yeah.
negotiate when they decide to take over the contract as the over the air broadcaster, let's call it.
Well, see, this is why I think free to wear isn't a conversation anymore. I think in today's age, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people want to see that. They want to see free access to Formula One, but I don't know how many things are free these days. Not many. It's not like the days of old. But rather, I think the challenge for Formula One is how do you capture that new audience when you don't have a free to air broadcaster where you can capture new mainstream people? And they're doing that through, for example, Drive to Survive, Netflix. That was one method to do it. But then how do you get somebody who doesn't watch Formula One to say, oh, I'm going to buy F1 TV, even though I don't care about Formula One, I don't watch it, but I just want to watch one race and see what it's like. How many people are going to do that? And so I think the way to target that these days is do a kind of what the NBA was kind of looking at, like going towards a big streaming service, like let's say Amazon Prime. Oh, hey, all Formula One races will be only available on Amazon Prime and or on Apple TV or something like that. And now people who already have those subscription services will be like, oh, do I want to watch this? Oh, look, Formula One's on. That's maybe the way, I think, in today's age to capture people. Maybe there's a better way. I'm not sure. We'll see what the future solution is for this kind of stuff because, social media, the internet, that's another method to capture people, as you mentioned before, Matt. So I don't know. I think F1 TV and going back to it is actually a very good product. I had it for I think I can safely say this now. I'm not going to get in trouble, am I? Even if I am, nobody cares about me really. But I ended up subscribing through Mexico through a VPN. Am I allowed to say that? Do we need to edit that out now?
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
on the
I
live
would I
stream.
would be careful giving away your personal information like
It's
that.
okay. It's I don't do this anymore, so it's all good. But because I'm not allowed to have it in Australia, and when I got to trial it that way, I thought, wow, this is like really cool to actually be able to just flick to any onboard you want. And there were podcasts I did on Missed Apex. We were able to get insights that the other TV broadcasters didn't because we were able to go through the data and go through telemetry, go through different stuff that was available. It was so cool. And so it gives fans an extra bit of access that you might not get. And so that's why I think F1 TV should still be accessible, but maybe, like you said, maybe the broadcast, no, but the other features that you don't get as part of your country's broadcast deal, maybe you should. I don't know. That's one thing. And then just to shift the topic just one more time, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, I remember when there were certain sports out there, they wouldn't care about copyright claims. Like, let's say online, you post a clip on YouTube and all of a sudden millions of people are watching it, and the sport would, there were a lot of sports out there who would claim copyrights, and then you wouldn't see that vision anymore. But I think if I'm a sport out there, I would probably say, hey, steal as much content as you can, well, within reason. Obviously, you don't want people doing, free live streams and all this kind of stuff, and people watching, you know what I mean, like pirated streams. But I'm more talking about, well, here's this great highlight from 25 years ago. Let it capture as much market share as possible, because it might hurt your product now in 2025, but in 15 years from now, the amount of market share and people you're going to reach from having so much content out there is best. I think that's the way that I would do sports if I was a big corporate, person, which I'm not. Maybe that was a bad take.
No, I mean, I think there's two ways to look at things like Formula One TV. It's either going to increase your audience because it will, for people who are into the sport, it will enhance their viewing of it. But really, if we go back to the Formula One survey, you'll recall that Drive to Survive is no longer the major way that news fans are coming into the sport. It's friends and family. And you look at Formula One TV as an additional offering on top of, like, I think it was Apple maybe's getting the rights. So if I'm Apple, I want Formula One because I have a universe of Apple viewers that I think will like Formula One. After all, we paid for the movie, didn't we? They don't know much about it. And I can package it for all my Apple subscribers. And there's a new universe of viewers out there. And if I'm Formula One TV, I'm happy with that. And then as they get more into the sport, if they want, there's this additional level that people can go to and get more information from. So I see that it correctly is as a multiplier for your audience having specialist programming like that available, as well as just like beautiful coverage of the races themselves.
All right, I've had enough of Stefano Domenicali and
Yeah, I
his.
was done like 30 minutes ago, if I'm being honest.
You're done in the first.
Yeah.
You were done at the reverse of the reverse grid sprint races.
The only interesting thing he talked about was spec parts and moving to the V8s and V10s.
Oh
And
yeah. Did we mention that?
No, we didn't mention that at all. We just talked a little bit about the other
Well,
regulations.
well, let me just quickly mention that before we move on. Is Domenicali is on the same page as FIA President Mohammed bin Sulayem in the sense that, and a lot of fans too, that they want V8 V10s with sustainable fuels. It's kind of a pathway that they might consider over the next 5-10 years, Matt. I think people want to hear those beautiful sounds of V8 V10s. I miss it. Nostalgia. Anyway.
Yeah, it's still going to be a turbocharged engine. I don't see
Mm.
honestly any difference in terms of sound. You could have a 4, a 5, or a 6, and they're each going to sound different. And a 5 and a 10 will sound like enough, but they're, first of all, they're probably going to be either turbos or bi-turbos. And second of all, and I just hate to break it to everybody,
Hmm.
there's no way there's not a hybrid component. It might not be the same
Yeah.
balance that we have now. Um, uh, but there's always going to be a hybrid component. You're not just going back to straight up burning even sustainable fuels with no electrical component, because the cars won't be fast enough. And frankly, having driven a BMW hybrid now, I got to be honest, they're a dream when you drive them in terms of the acceleration compared to because your torque band is just infinite when you're using the electric motors to power yourself out of corners. It's just beautiful. So
No,
I
no.
think from a
Okay.
driver's point of view as well, they won't want to go back to that. Yeah, it'll be fun. You could go watch a historic race. You can hear the 10s and the 12s and the 6s and then crazy BMW 4s that put out 1,500 horsepower in qualifying. They're all there for you to go and enjoy if you want as a fan. And it's probably a much cheaper ticket too. But as far as the pinnacle of motorsport goes, you're looking sustainable fuels, something between a 4 and an 8 probably, and some hybrid component.
You're opening up a can of worms, Matt, and I think a lot of fans are covering their ears because that's not what they want to hear. They want the V10s back, and
Yeah,
anyway, we'll
I
move on
know.
to we'll move on to another can of worms, and that's this has caused a lot of controversy lately, and it's kind of the strategy that McLaren have gone with over the last couple of races with their two drivers who are title challengers, as you know, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, or I'll flip that around because Piastri is leading the title charge at the moment. Now, the big conversation has kind of been the freedom over choosing strategy. Now, if we go back, just a quick history lesson. When I say history, I mean the last two races here. And that's in Hungary, Lando Norris, who was behind at the start. Now, when I say the start, I mean, you know what I mean, like the first few laps, the first stint, whoever's behind at the end of the first stint. He was behind, he went on the alternate strategy, and he won the race. And that caused a lot of controversy. All the Aussies saying that McLaren support Norris and they're not helping him win, which doesn't make any sense because then the race at Belgium, the exact same situation happened. Norris was behind at the end of the first stint, got the alternate strategy, but finished second. Now, people can say, well, that wasn't the plan. He was trying to, McLaren tried to get him in front. He just wasn't good enough. It happened in Austria too. I'm pretty sure was it Piastri in Austria. I can't remember off the top of my head. He got the alternate strategy there as well. So, look, this is the beauty of the sport: is that each fan base is going to think they're correct, and then the other fan base is going to argue with them. We're going to have a lot of biff going on. But I think this is all pre-planned, Matt, and we'll delve into this in the next few minutes. McLaren have come up with a plan, and I like this for the title charge, that they're putting one driver on the main strategy and allowing the other driver to go to an alternate strategy because they know that they're the two biggest threats for each other in the title. So why not let them race for it? I don't see the issue with this. I don't see why you would put them on the same strategy and then we go, okay, Oscar Piastri is leading into turn one, lap one, and that's it. We just have to watch Lando Norris sit behind him because it's almost borderline impossible to pass in the same car, same strategy over 70 laps.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much nailed it on. But I have to add that, especially if you're going to look at Hungary, you had the additional strategic issue of Leclerc not being slow at the start of the race. And so if I know I want the two stop because it's the optimal strategy, which was the pretty firm belief, I think, of most people uh, going into it. If I want the two stop, and if I'm Piastri at a high degradation circuit, why would I not want the two stop? I don't have to worry as much about taking care of my tires. I can light into them, take more out of them, and make it up by simply being faster. And you've got Leclerc who's stayed out on track. Well, now I have a real issue. And happily enough, I have Norris who'd fallen behind and spent some time making passes. So you can say, hey, Lando, there's this other strategy that might work. You could win the race with it, 1 out of 17 times, according to our latest numbers. Would you like to give it a try? Because we've also noticed that the Ferrari is staying out there, and we kind of want to cover that possibility off. If it turns out the one stop is faster, we want at least one of our drivers on that strategy.
Yeah.
Now, that's may not be the case at every track, but certainly at Hungary that was the case. But fundamentally, what you want, and we could go back to Mercedes. Fundamentally, what you need is both of your drivers to buy into the same idea of what's allowable. If I'm in the lead, I don't want the driver behind me to have any strategy other than the one I'm on. But if I'm behind, I think it's reasonable to say, hey, there is an alternate strategy if you'd like to try it. And as we often would see with Mercedes, it would sometimes just come down to, well, you could go an extra 10 laps and have a tire offset at the end if you want. And that almost never works. But as the tires have gotten better and their management of them is so good, one stops are starting to come about as realistic options. The Pirelli's getting better at balancing the two. So happily enough for us, what that means is the end of the race gets very exciting.
You're talking about the Mercedes from the Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg days?
Bottas.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The heyday
absolutely.
of Bottas. First off, Matt, can we not mention there was
he won some races.
There was no. I wouldn't say there was a title challenge there at all, but
No,
we can
wasn't.
add Valtteri in there. Sorry, Valtteri. I don't mean to be rude. I mean, he's kind of an Aussie, so maybe there's a bit of respect there for the Finn, who's somehow become Australian. I feel like he's more Australian than Finnish over the last 5 years, thanks to his girlfriend Tiffany Cromwell. Now, just to kind of nip something in the bud, Oscar Piastri on record, this is going back to Belgium. He said, or at least insinuated, that the alternate strategy for the driver behind is pre-planned. And I remember he maybe said it was post-race. I can't remember when, if it was in the instant post-race interview or something a little bit later in the media pen. But in Belgium, if you remember, he was behind at the start. Norris was the lead car at the safety car start. I'm pretty sure Oscar admitted he was supposed to be on that alternate strategy that Norris was on, and the same alternate strategy that Norris used in Hungary. I'm pretty sure if the roles were switched, you would have saw Oscar Piastri revert to that more risky strategy. Now, because he ended up in front of him in Belgium at the start of the race, he ended up taking the main strategy, and they had to switch that around. Andrea Stella as well. Is he team boss? What's the correct? I think team boss is the correct way
He's the
to call him.
team principal.
Yeah, the
Zach
team
is the
principal.
CEO. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a different kind of structure there to some teams. But anyway, Andrea Stella has kind of said, look, he's quoted saying, we want to make sure that none of the drivers are surprised, and he thinks none of the drivers were surprised. That's a direct quote from Andrea Stella. And I got to say, Matt, that's because it is pre-planned. As we said, these things you'll see in Zandvoort in a couple of weeks' time. McLaren are likely going to do this. They're going to go on alternate strategy. The lead car will take the risk-free strategy, and the driver behind will say, hey, I need to beat my teammate for the title. They're going to go on a different strategy, which is exactly what I think we should have in the sport, rather than what we saw in Mercedes 10 years ago between Hamilton and Rosberg, where they were more kind of, well, we don't want to make it unfair between the both of them. Mercedes kind of most races, not every single race, but most races, they would put them on the same strategy and say, okay, hey, you guys are fighting each other on the same strategy. It's not unfair. Go for it.
Yeah, and I think as viewers, I prefer the McLaren approach, frankly. And the big thing, and I think you've nailed it here, and this is what Stella, the point he's making is, none of this is a surprise. The drivers sit down and and your strategist says, okay, here are our strategies. This is our premier strategy. This is our number one strategy. We think it's the optimal strategy, especially for the leading car. Here's a second option. Here's a third option. Here's a fourth option. And each one of them gets dicier in terms of your win probability from the lead. So yeah, they will probably give the lead, if it's really 50-50, they're just going to go to the lead driver and say, okay, do you want to go long and do the one stop, or do you want to do the two stop? And then whatever that driver chooses, then they go to the driver behind and they say, okay, the driver, Oscar's going two. Do you want to stick with two and go for a tire offset, or do you want to try the one stop? And if it's a strategic thing with, say, a Ferrari or a Red Bull or a Mercedes potentially in the mix, then it's not going to be entirely a driver choice. It's going to be more of them saying, yeah, we're going to go with plan XD37Q. Do you think you can pull it off? Because they want to cover off the possibility of the two stop falling apart and Mercedes going long and winning a race. Because after all, they want to win everything and they want the top two steps in every single race. So they're going to look to make sure no one gets sneaky. No one sneaks one in on them.
Which is funny because Zach Brown also saying, hey, we recognize the consequences of this title battle. And he referred to the 2007 intra-team battle between Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso. Come on, Zach Brown. I really like Zach Brown. And if he's listening to this, we love you here at Missed Apex. But that was one of the worst things I've ever heard. Is you're comparing this to 2007? First off, Fernando Alonso is one of the biggest hotheads in the sport's history. I don't think you have that with Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri. And I think the best example of that is Lando Norris, who made that was a complete howler in Canada, where he just drove straight into the back of Oscar Piastri. But there was no fallout. He apologized. They got over it. I just think our generation, Matt, people in our 20s, this generation, we just don't fall out. It's not a thing. My parents and people of the generation above us, there's a lot of falling out. There's a lot of beef, a lot of freezing people out of their lives. We don't do that. It's just like ironing shirts. That's something we've eradicated from our generation. We just don't iron shirts anymore, Matt. That's a thing of the old.
I don't understand this. You got to iron your shirts. The thing that bothers me about the 2007 comparison is, yeah, I think there's more teammate respect there, but neither Oscar nor Lando is a rookie at this point, and both have been with the team several years, which wasn't the case, obviously, in 2007 with Lewis being a rookie and Alonso being an already world champion. But more to the point, uh, their constructors championship, which is what matters to the team. I mean, I know it matters to the garages, the drivers championship, and they want to win them both. But in terms of the money and in terms of the business side, your money comes from winning the constructors championship. That's not really in any doubt at this point. So you don't have in
Yeah.
2007 they lost themselves a championship they could have won if they managed their drivers better. And I just you know they could probably crash each other out for the entire rest of the season and still win the constructors and drivers championship from here. It's really the car is that dominant. And so I don't see it. Like, I appreciate he's trying to pump up the drama a little bit, but just like, look, just put him on just give the better strategy to the driver behind and let him race the last 10 laps, man. That worked great at Hungary. Let's just keep that on a roll.
And I think they're going to keep doing that for the rest of the season, which is great to see. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because Zach Brown, kind of from the quote of comparing this to 2007, was the threat of, he was kind of insinuating that we don't want another driver from another team to win the title. First off, I don't know if he's looked at the standings, but Max Verstappen's 4 races behind in points, almost. I think 3.5 races. It ain't happening. I'm sorry to say. I'm pretty sure Max also knows it's not happening unless some miracle occurs to end this season. So it's a different threat to how Kimi Raikkonen stole that 2007 title from McLaren, which McLaren also stole documents from Ferrari. Anyway, I don't know why I brought that up, but
Oh yeah,
there
yeah.
was a
Let's not
steal on each
even.
end of
Yeah, yeah.
there's a steal on each end of that title there. All right, well, somebody who's gone for good. Well, actually, I mean that's a kind of a good question. There's not even a segue to that. Christian Horner, is he gone for good? Matt, I'm confused here. What's happening? Because documents filed publicly show that he's been removed as director of Red Bull Racing and Technology. So is he still getting paid? What's the insight? Do Red Bull still owe him money? I don't think he was on the books anyway as part of the cost cap, because he's not a kind of race performance staff member, and also even if he was, he'd be in the top 3 paid. So that's also someone who's eradicated. So there's a whole bunch of rules. We won't go into the intricacies of the cost cap, but I don't know what to make of this anymore. Because as far as I know, he's got a big deal. He's going to earn reportedly $50 million over the course of his deal, is what some reports have said. Christian Horner, is he there?
He's no.
He's
No,
not
he's
there.
not there. I think we have this thing on Broadway that used to be called Walkers. You brought a show in, and depending upon the size of the house, you had to have a minimum size orchestra. And if you didn't need all those people, you still had to hire them. And they're called Walkers. And you just got hired and you just got paid for the run of the show. And life was beautiful. Horner's a Walker right now. He's got nothing to do with the team. Maybe he's still collecting a salary from Red Bull corporate, the marketing side of the business, not the race team, but he's fully out of the race team. And I'm sure, assuming that he's not subsequently found to have engaged, because I know there's like yet another thing coming up for him. I think if you get to the backside of that, and there's still the
Wait.
same findings that there have been in the last 2 investigations, which is he didn't commit any sort of
Okay.
misconduct that
Mhm.
rose to the level of firing. I'm not going to comment on my personal feelings about what he's accused of, because that's really, you know, I have my own feelings about that. Everybody does. Not worth rehashing. We're talking about the business side of it here. The business side of it is that if he gets out of that unscathed, Red Bull owe him a lot of money because he had a contract, and he will get a fat buyout offer. And if he's smart, he will take it. On the other hand, is he gone for good? I don't know. I thought Briatore was gone for good, and
And he
like
came back. Yeah.
Yep. And here he is. So
Well,
so I don't think you really, unless someone's properly like in jail for something, which he's not in jail for anything. Don't worry about that. Unless you're properly in jail, there's always the possibility that you're going to wind up somewhere back in the sport. And with his pedigree, it wouldn't be surprising to see him eventually with another team, maybe not as a team principal, but as an investor or an owner, or playing some other role.
yeah, I think he's not being banned from the sport like Flavio Briatore was.
Yeah.
And yet Flavio's back in the sport and committed. Anyway, we won't go into the details of the whole legal proceedings because as we know, it can be used in court and we don't want to get involved. And Missed Apex is just a friendly fan, supported podcast, and we love Formula One. Anyway, there's a man named Stefan Salza that's
Yeah.
taken over Horner's role, which is what was in these documents. Now, I don't know who that is. I've never heard of the name. Apparently, he was the Red Bull global head of HR, also known as the anti-Horner. Really, is that role? I think is one way to say it. Sorry, Christian. That's a low blow. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry, Christian Horner. Now, I've got to say one more thing is I looked into those. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Somebody on Twitter posted. It's not Twitter anymore. It's X. Somebody posted how Red Bull had about 50 job postings for either their Red Bull engine tech or some other form of um, some other part of their company. I don't know if it was the powertrains, Matt, or the actual F1 team itself. But anyway, I went on LinkedIn myself. I had a look, and it's real. Ever since Laurent Mekies came in and Horner's left, I don't know what that means. I don't know the full details behind it. But all I know is that there are 50 job postings. And now that I've started servicing my car, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be applying for one of those.
And they might just be desperate enough to take you. You never know.
I
No,
might be able to move over to the UK. Yes.
I would fully expect that some number of people move from Racing Bulls to Red Bull, along with Mekis, as soon as they can get replacements. But it's not an unknown phenomena. And if the reports are true, especially with the power units coming in next season, it's not surprising because they didn't have their own power unit division before.
Hmm.
So it's not entirely surprising to me. They've reached a point where they need just simply more staff. And yeah, I'm sure there are absolute Horner loyalists in that team who are like, well, I'm out the door now because you've gotten rid of the reason that I was staying here, which is Horner. But also, I mean, the car and the team itself has been through a lot of turmoil. And this is just, I would say, this is probably just the final phase of removing Horner from being team principal. And again, if we look around, and I'm always a big fan of this, we have Wheatley gone, you got Newey gone, and I think Newey was really the start of this in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. Him deciding to leave for whatever
Well,
reasons, he decided to leave, kind of opened the door to where we are now. And but like if you look at Wheatley at Sauber, suddenly you go, okay, well, how much of Red Bull's success is just Christian Horner being the person who, is responsible for that success, and how much of it is the people underneath him who are actually demonstrating like really marked competence now that they've stepped up in the world and we can see more clearly the kind of work they're capable of. So if I was looking at Horner, yeah, he built that team, but I'd be looking at Wheatley and the other people, Rob Marshall at McLaren. I'd be looking at the other people who've left Red Bull and the job they're doing, and I'd be asking myself, did he manage has he managed himself out of a championship winning team because the talent wasn't all his to begin with?
Well, let's finish up on kind of a segue to Cadillac because they've been reportedly poaching staff, not just from Red Bull, but from across the grid with big salary offers. I
Yeah.
don't know how true that is. So I've read it in a couple places. Two sources has to be true these days. I think that can pass. Um, I don't know if they're going for Christian Horner. We had a listener. I remember I was talking to one of our listeners, going, "Well, who would be the next team principal of Cadillac?" And I was kind of thinking, well, Christian Horner would be a great get. Experience, kind of, he lives and breathes motorsport. I'm pretty sure we'll see him back in some form of motorsport somewhere. Maybe it's a kind of even a Zach Brown role at a different company. Who knows? But back to Cadillac, I'm a bit concerned with this, Matt, because if they are poaching staff, and sometimes they say, hey, you're a great engineer at Aston Martin or you're a great engineer at McLaren and you're doing well, how about instead of $100,000, we'll give you $200,000 next year? Come and work for that, work for us. The problem is that all counts towards the cost cap. Now, I'm not saying that Cadillac are going to hit the cost cap with the amount of money they're going to use, but I'm saying it could be money better spent elsewhere. I don't know if making a statement by poaching staff with double the salaries is a good thing. Maybe it's better. You know what? Maybe it's a better thing than what Eric Bollier did, which was offer Freddos to staff who achieved certain. Do you remember that story
Yeah, I
6 years
did.
ago?
Yeah.
Eric Bollier gave the Freddo Gate. It was where they were giving staff Freddos for good performance. McLaren's gone a long way since Freddo Gate.
Yeah. Well, again, if you look around, if you look at McLaren, you'll see there's a lot of ex Mercedes, a lot of ex Red Bull people, not just in their technical team, but also near the top of their technical structure. And if I'm Cadillac, there is no better move than to poach people who've been in the business a long time. And I would look at Mercedes, I would look at Red Bull, and to a certain extent at Ferrari, because you want that. You're buying the employee, but you're buying what's in their brain. And what's in their brain is 20 to 30 years worth of race winning technology and processes and understanding and the ability to correctly evaluate. And this is where it gets really hard for a new team. They're going to walk in the door and say, you need this simulator. We need to deal with these people for our dyno testing. We need to deal with these people for our, for our outsourced manufactured parts. We need this specific kind of oven to lay up our carbon fiber. We need these tools because they're the best. They have all that knowledge. They can sit down and tell you exactly what you need to put a car on track and have it at least be, and this is their stated goal, is like they've already admitted, like, oh yeah, no, this is a hard thing to do. I think GM was maybe not really fully getting the picture earlier in the year, but they've come out now and said, oh yeah, like, our goal like is literally just 107%. We want two cars to finish every race, and we just want to be respectable. We don't want to be 5 or 10 laps down. And that is where you have to start with a brand new team. And that's always the challenge. And then it's just how quickly you can get over that. And the easiest way to get there is to hire the people who have the most knowledge. And you do that by giving them way more money. That's a far better investment at this point for them. Tools and engineers and knowledge is a far better investment for them than drivers at this point.
Then you have the anti-argument to that, which is a friend of yours. Am I allowed to say friend? Otmar Zafnauer?
Yeah.
Is you
we've
guys
we've
have
had drinks
spoken
together. So yeah.
Yes, that's a friend. If you've had drinks with someone, yeah, that's the new definition. That we're defining rookies as anyone these days in Formula One. I think you can define anyone as a friend. So,
Yeah.
um, going back to now, I know his exit from Alpine wasn't the best. It wasn't probably his best stint that he'd love to remember, but his stint at Force India and at Racing Point was very good, and the way he was able to extract performance out of such limited budget, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but he kind of revealed to you that the budget was actually a lot cheaper than I thought with the figure that he told you over there. So I don't know if that's Cadillac are trying to make a statement, are they trying to come into the sport and just, I'm just concerned is what I'm trying to say, that maybe they're putting money into the wrong places, but based on what you're saying, you think no. You think the knowledge and the car that's it. They got to find other ways to get discounts though. I don't know how.
Well, drivers are useful for that. So they're using Ferrari power units. I would be surprised to see a Ferrari Academy driver there. Maybe not first season, because it's been shared by people that it can be particularly challenging for a rookie in a brand new team. But on the other hand, if you're a rookie, you also can bring a lot more money. Like you could bring, the budget of the gross domestic product of a small country with you, which can help offset some costs. And, you're not limited by having had to learn how to drive previous F1 cars. You're just going to start out with this car as its own thing, and that might actually be advantageous, not having those habits to unlearn. I'm going to bring up MotoGP again. Now I'm going to start to irritate the F1 fans,
No,
but
no.
we
I
had
might
that
fall
last
asleep here.
year with Pedro Acosta on the KTM, the satellite team, just absolutely smashing the veterans because he didn't have, he was coming up from Moto 2 and he didn't have any preconceived notions about the best way to drive the bike. He just got on it and went faster than everybody else because he didn't know any better. So that's what you get sometimes with a rookie.
I promise everybody that'll be the last mention of MotoGP. It's blasphemous now to mention MotoGP for at least the rest of this podcast, which we're about to wrap up anyway, Matt.
I
Yeah.
may or may not have a bet with Kyle about how many times I could work it in this show.
Well, there you go. Anything to? I mean, we haven't. There's a whole lot of topics we've missed, Matt. There's a whole lot of speculation over the mid-season break. Anything else to cover before we go? Do you reckon? Kind of
Well, I
the
mean, we did have some listener reckons, and I know we're talking about team principals. Graham Loudon, to my knowledge, is the team principal at Cadillac. So
he is. Yes.
I think if they acquire a Horner in their future, he would be more. You've got Pat Simmons there, and you've got Graham Loudon. I think if they get a Horner, he's going to be more like a Zach CEO kind of role than team principal. I don't see any reason to get rid of Loudon. He's very, very, very accomplished at what he does, and he's good with a small budget. And it's going to be like a small budget team in a lot of ways as they get set up. I did, because this came up. Just the argument of should they have a rookie on the team or should they get two experienced
Well,
drivers? And in order to settle an internet argument, I did go and look at the crash statistics this year of the rookies versus the pros.
yeah.
So we could go through that real quick because I know that everybody loves me just reading lots of
Well,
numbers.
I would say before you go into it, and by the way, these are intriguing numbers. The rumor is it's either Valtteri Bottas and slash or Sergio Perez, and there
Yeah.
could be a lot of money involved with both those deals. That's the thing at the moment. That's who Graham Loudon, the team principal, is kind of. I guess he's kind of insinuated that. Can I also actually quickly touch on that? We did mention earlier. I think I said something wrong. The question from the reckon from the listener was more who would be the best team principal for Cadillac. Can we clarify, like you said, Matt? They already do have a team principal. It is Graham Loudon, who is a veteran name in Formula One, and I think is a great name to lead the project. But will he opt for a rookie or a young driver the way that, for example, allegedly, and I read this today, that Red Bull or Honda offered Red Bull a discount on the power unit supply for taking on Yuki Tsunoda? Is that something, or is that another way? And going back to budget, is that a way to save money or at least make money? Is go for a young driver? And you've got the crash statistics to prove why it is or isn't a good idea.
Yeah. So, from a money point of view, rookies are a great idea. They'll bring the biggest budget. They'll be the least, smallest cost. They're not a cost line anyway. I think the drivers are
But then,
exempt
but
from
then,
the.
sort of,
Yeah.
sort of cut you off straight away. Then you have the opposite effect, which is if they crash a lot, it nullifies the effect of all the money they bring in. So then you have
Yeah.
that counter argument.
Yeah. Well, you just write the contract so they have to cover the crash damage in addition to the sponsorship they bring to the team because they call it sponsorship. But really, they're paying for these race seats. All the drivers pay for their race seats one way or another, even if they
Mhm.
collect a salary from the team. But I did like someone's like, you would never want a rookie. They crash all the time. And you know how things just kind of seize you and you're like, okay, well, everybody says rookies crash all the time, but like, has anyone ever looked at it? So I had to think and I'm like, what's going to be the best proxy, not just for crashing, because all drivers crash. We see them crash when they race. But what's going to be the best proxy for like proper rookie mistakes that you only make your first season. And so what I came up with was the solo off that causes a red flag, right? So this can be in practice, this can be in qualifying, can be in the race. I thought
Gotcha.
that's going to be the thing. I'm out there, I'm on the track, I'm all by myself, and suddenly I've driven into a wall, and that's a rookie mistake. Now, it turns out not only rookies make mistakes like that. So this is what I found out. There have been 7 rookies this season so far, halfway through. Jack Doohan, who's no longer racing, and Colapinto and the rest. They have had 17 of these incidents, 2 of which were getting beached in the gravel, which brought out the red flag in practices,
That's
versus
not too bad.
the other 14 drivers who've had a total of 12 and 1 beaching, which was an Alonso beaching.
Oh, +5. I'm investing in the rookies already. +5 is not as bad as you think.
Well, but let's talk about it. They
Here we go.
are,
Okay.
as a result, 2.83 times as likely to have this sort of a solo incident. And they average 2.43 of them per driver versus 0.86 for your pros. So there is kind of a big difference there. But interestingly, and perhaps most tellingly, 9 of these incidents happened for the rookies in free practice, and only 4 for your veteran drivers. In qualifying, they only had 3, whereas your pros actually had 4 in qualifying. And then in the races, once again, the rookies take the lead. They had 5 of these incidents versus 3 for your pros. And you can see making the mistakes in free practice, not making them in qualifying means they're not really finding the edge of the car. And then once again, in the races, what matters most? Getting to the end. Although, to be fair, the vast majority of these incidents happened in Australia, where you had the bad weather, and in Silverstone, where you also had the bad weather. So a lot of it is also, I think, very much weather related. So to answer the question, it depends on the rookie, because the median pro has one of these incidents over half a season. Antonelli and Lawson each have only had 1 incident. And I know everyone's like, Antonelli may not be a surprise, but I bet Lawson is a big surprise. Now, he's had a lot of on-track action with other drivers, but the reason I didn't include that, and I'll just tell you real quick, is I thought about it as like, oh, well, the Antonelli steaming into Verstappen in Austria is like, what a rookie mistake. But you brought it up yourself. And I thought, but then what about Lando steaming into the back of Piastri? And so there's just so much subjectivity once the cars are racing each other, deciding, is it a rookie? I was like, no, if I just keep it to this small category, it'll be most illuminating.
I think the number that tells the bigger story here, because stats are stats, right? And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
get people, and this is not a dig at anyone who likes numbers and stats, but I think they should be used with a grain of salt or to tell a story. And the story here is 9 free practice crashes is not so bad. That's where the majority of the crashes come from. Whereas if you can get some good results in the race from a rookie who's also going to be paying you a lot of money, I don't know. There's advantages and disadvantages. You have the other factor too. If you're Graham Loudon at Cadillac, like I don't think he's going to be like the yardstick is how much pressure are you going to put on the rookie, and what's his name from Haas again? How am I
Behrman,
forgetting his name? No, the old team principal. Oh, Gunther Steiner. How am I
Steiner.
forgetting Gunther Steiner's name?
Yeah.
He's probably going to be insulted that we've already forgotten his name. It's only been a couple of years, but he kind of put a lot of pressure on Mick Schumacher at one stage, and it got to a point where I feel like Mick had lost confidence, and I was just watching this unfold publicly, going, "This is terrible leadership of a young driver or a driver," and that's a situation that Graham Loudon I think could probably learn a lesson from, and if he opts for a young driver, won't do that. But I also think there's an advantage here, Matt, in the sense that if you can also get money from a veteran called Sergio Perez, and he's raced a lot of races, he's a Formula One race winner, has been in a world championship car, didn't win the championship, but you know what I mean.
I do.
There's a win-win. There's a win-win situation there as well. So I think that could be technically your rookie because he's the one paying a lot of the bills. And then you have Valtteri Bottas as well, who's a very solid, consistent, a good midfield driver as well, and did a decent job at Mercedes, challenging. Well, actually, looking back at the numbers, didn't really challenge Lewis Hamilton. Maybe 3 races to start 2019, and that's it. So I don't know. It's an interesting topic to talk about. I think I don't know when we'll hear that driver announcement for both those seats, but it doesn't seem too far away.
Yeah, I'm just going to add this. They would be very smart if you look at the performance of Lewis Hamilton to get someone who was familiar with driving the Ferrari powertrain, because that's the engine they're going to have next season. And mastering a new car and a brand new power unit is a much bigger challenge. I mean, I think, you brought up Haas. You can look at how well Ollie Behrman slotted into the team because he was an academy driver. He went to Ferrari debriefs. He spent time on the simulator. He learned how to drive that particular engine. And it made, despite the fact that he and Bortoleto were also the crashiest, it certainly made his performances at the team this season when he's been on very, very good, and given poor old Ocon a bit of a hard time, especially in qualifying. And you see it with Sainz too, going to the Mercedes from the Ferrari power unit. A lot of it is there really is an art to how these engines deliver power and how you have to manipulate them to get the car to do what you want. And it does take some time to get used to it. So if I was Cadillac and I was going to take a rookie, I would very much want someone from the Ferrari Academy or someone who had spent a lot of time doing test and reserve duties for them or one of the other Ferrari powered teams.
Or you can go with Jack Crawford from Formula 2, an American, a
Yeah.
United States of A driver.
Go freedom. Yeah.
Anything to plug, Matt, before we go?
I think we talked a lot about the MotoGP pod. So, MotoGP is back. If you're
It
suffering
is.
from a lack
I
of
think it's
racing,
on.
it was
I think
on
it was
today.
on while
It's,
we were recording.
yeah, it's already happened. Trust me, because my WhatsApp message board for the MotoGP show has blown up with excitement. Yeah, it's if you tune in now, watch the end of the season, you're going to get to see Marc Marquez do like Lewis Hamilton, Michael Schumacher kind of thing. And that'll be fun to watch, and it'll be a good introduction to the sport, which is just way crazier than anything you've ever watched before.
Matt Trumpets at Matt PT55 on X and on socials as well. Now I've been covering. I work for 10 News Melbourne here in Australia. I do a lot of sports reporting. I've been covering MotoGP for half the season. I have to write some of our reports, and then every time I'm rewatching the sprints and the races, it's like I got to the point the other day where I literally wrote this in the script and I said, Marc Marquez has won again. Marc
Yeah.
Marquez has topped the timesheets again. The word again is starting to pop up in the scripts because it's just becoming a norm with Marc Marquez, who is one of the greatest riders of all time that we've seen in that sport, and on his way to a seventh title, joining Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. Oh, wait, different sports. We won't compare those two
We
sports,
won't
but there you
compare
go.
them, but the
Joining the
dominance.
Rossies and the,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you get there. But coming back from basically a career-ending injury and in a
Hmm.
really savage surgery to give him one more shot, and he's worked his way up to the best bike on the grid. And right now, no one can touch him. However, we do have the other story of Jorge Martin, last year's champion, being so badly injured. His first race was like what, last weekend? He's been out the whole season. He's just come back on Aprilia. So there's another storyline for you to follow there too.
Okay, well that's it. I promised that we wouldn't talk about MotoGP again, and we've done it. And I
Kyle owes
will
me
find
money
Matt
now.
after. That's it. You can follow me as well at Johnny S8 JONNYESS8. I hope you enjoyed this because mid-season breaks are not fun when it comes to Formula One news, and it feels like there's barely been Formula One in the last month and a half because there hasn't been. And I can't wait for Zandvoort in a fortnight's time. I'm going to get my fix of motorsport in a couple of weeks. Now, I hope you enjoyed. This has been the Mr. Apex mid-season news show, you could say, mid-season break news show from Jonathan Simon, from Matt Trumpets. Hope you enjoyed. Uncle Steve as well producing. Shout out to Uncle Steve as well behind the scenes. But for now, though, stay tuned. We'll have more episodes during the week and over the next couple of weeks and months and years for sure. But for now, take care and goodbye.